Hi there, my name is Lynn Donovan, and I'm the theologian in residence at St. Andrews in Picton. Every 3 or 4 years, I bring out an old sermon that is inspired by the miracle of the transformation of water into wine at a wedding. So the story goes that Jesus is at this wedding, and the wine runs out, which is a totally horrendous thing to happen in a culture where hospitality is central. And so the story goes, turns 600 big clay pots of water used for ritual purification practices into wine. And when you do the math, it is kind of like the equivalent of 600 bottles of wine showing up at a party. Don't really have to read between the lines, do you, to see what's going on. It's the Gospel of John, and John, who is just a master of metaphor and epiphany, is inviting us to put on a new set of glasses in order to see underneath sometimes our very challenging, anxious-driven lives on a very challenging, anxious-driven planet, that there may be abundance and joy and connection in our lives if only we have eyes to see and let this story be the story that transforms us. Every time I preach this service, I talk about a girlfriend of mine who I lived with in university who was just the quintessential party animal. And years later, she reached out to me to ask if I would do her wedding. And I was in Saskatchewan for the summer, so sure enough, I was able to be there. It was in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. It was going to be held at her mother's place, another incredibly hospitable woman. Her brother picked me up at the Greyhound station in Moose Jaw, and I was inquiring as to whether or not there was going to be a banquet. Sure there was. And where was that going to be? Oh, it's going to be in Mum and George's addition, he said. Wow, that sounds like quite an addition, I thought. And then I said, well, what about a dance? If Glenn is there, it will be a party with dancing. And he goes, yeah, that too is going to be in Mum and George's addition. And I thought, wow. And sure enough, Mum and George had built an addition the size of their house with cathedral ceilings. And I thought to myself, wow, that's taking partying seriously. Such extravagance. However, in the story that John records as Jesus' first miracle, isn't that the same thing that's kind of happening? Everyone's already had more than enough to drink, and sure enough, another 600 bottles of wine show up at the party. We have been a global community that has suffered much in the last 2.5 years, and getting another report today from the man who is responsible for the UN's food program. There is more loss to come unless we work together as a global community to ensure that food and fertilizer is distributed well around the planet. We have the means of getting together, gathering around a table, and sharing so that all might have enough. So that the party will go on, so that this life, which is so intended for joy and relationship, can be enjoyed to the fullest. I invite you, good friends, to consider where you need to put on the glasses that will enable you to see all of your rich connections, all the gifts that are present, all of the abundance, all that is necessary for your well-being today. That was the invitation of Jesus to his friends, that we might all live with imagination and compassion and purpose and joy. I wish you good Sabbath.